Welcome back, everyone. This is The Changelog. We're a member-supported blog, podcast, and weekly email that covers what's fresh and what's new in open source. Check out the blog at thechangelog.com, which is now hosted on a blazing fast DigitalOcean SSD cloud server. I'm pretty proud of that. I'll give you some details here in a bit. But our past shows can be found at 5by5.tv/changelog, and you can subscribe to our weekly email. It's called The Changelog Weekly. We cover everything that hits our open source radar. Subscribe at thechangelog.com/weekly. This show is hosted by myself, Adam Stacoviak, and also Andrew Thorpe. Andrew, say hello.
Yo, what's going on?
We kind of had some change of plans this week. Kind of worked out though, right?
Yeah, excited. Because of it, we get to talk about some pretty cool stuff with some cool people here.
Cool stuff, cool people. All right. And this is episode 112. And today's show is sponsored by DigitalOcean and TopTal. TopTal, that's TOPTAL. We'll tell you a bit more about them later in the show, but TopTal connects startups, businesses, and organizations to a growing network of elite engineers around the world. So pretty cool stuff there. TopTal.com/developer if you want to apply. But DigitalOcean, I'm pretty excited about this. So DigitalOcean's been supporting the show for a bit now. We partnered with them a couple months back. And, we've been telling you about DigitalOcean for quite some time, and all the while kind of being envious, waiting to get hosted on blazing fast SSD cloud servers. And I got to say that this past week we pulled the trigger. I was a little intimidated because if Andrew, like, you know me, I'm not much of a hacker. I'm more of a front-end guy, right? Mm-hmm. So I built an Ubuntu server this past week. I built a web server. It would not have happened unless I got over that intimidation hurdle thanks to DigitalOcean tutorials. They got some really rock-solid tutorials on building a LAMP stack on Ubuntu. So really thrilled about that. I kind of got over that. So if you're out there and you're like, man, I want to use some really cutting-edge, super awesome hosting, and DigitalOcean sounds just like that, well, guess what it is. But get over that intimidation hurdle because they got some really good tutorials. In the show notes, we're going to link out to them. And I hope to kind of do a digestion of what I've done and kind of what I've learned too. And I've learned lots of cool new tricks this week, so I can't wait to share them with you. And if you got any questions, say hello on Twitter or whatever. We'll sync up on it. But backups, snapshots, root access, resizing of your droplet, an awesome, simple, easy to use dashboard, just phenomenal. We love DigitalOcean. And we want you to try DigitalOcean today for free using our promo code. It's Changelog Sent Me. That's Changelog Sent Me, which will give you a $10 hosting credit or 2 months free. So head to DigitalOcean and become awesome today. DigitalOcean.com. And we got some awesome people now today, Andrew. We got Jonathan Smiley and Mark Hayes from ZURB. We're here talking about Foundation 5. And I guess you guys, Jonathan, you guys got some crazy stuff going on there. So Andrew, kick off the show for us, man.
Yeah, so like you said, we're here with Jonathan and Mark from ZURB, and we're here to talk about Foundation 5 and also talk about a new project that they got. I don't know when they released it, so we'll let them kind of kick it off and introduce. So, Jonathan, why don't you kind of give us an introduction to who you and Mark are, and Mark can kind of weigh into and tell us a little bit about ZURB for those who don't know and what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I can do that. So, hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Smiley. I'm one of the partners here at ZURB. I'm here with Mark Hayes. He's one of our senior engineers. ZURB is a product design company in Campbell, California. We're down at the south end of Silicon Valley. If you ask all the agencies up in the city, that's the uncool end of the valley, but whatever, screw those guys.
That's not true.
But we've been around ZURB's actually been around for a little over 15 years now. I've been with ZURB for 5, and Mark, you've been here for
2.5
2.5
years before we released the first version of Foundation.
Feels like a lot longer than 2.5 years that you've been here, but time flies when you're crazy busy. But we've got a number of projects that we have going on at any given time. The ones that we want to talk to you guys about, and that we're like neck deep in right now, are Foundation, which is an open source framework that we developed a couple of years ago now. For building responsive websites. It was, I think, actually the first, basically feature-complete responsive framework. So we've been working on that for a couple of years, and we have an all-new version of that coming out on Thursday next week. So a week from today, actually. Well, a week from today as we're sitting here recording it.
Yes, that's true.
But
it's Thursday.
It's coming out on the 21st. And then we also just recently released, was Inc. last week?
Yeah.
God, it feels like longer
We
ago.
we covered that too. It actually wasn't we. It was one of us, Jared Santo, our managing editor. He was like, Adam, did you see this yet? And I think Andrew, I think Kelly's using ink. He was an early adopter. Showed me this I think a month back. But I think you guys just released. Didn't you have some earlier version of ink though that was responsive?
We had a so ink is like Foundation but for emails. We had about a year ago, almost a year ago. We developed some basically responsive email templates, just some basic responsive template files that we offered up through our playground. We have a playground where we basically just dump weird, interesting code experiments. But we posted the responsive templates to that, and they've been really, really popular actually over the course of the last about a year, I think. And that actually sort of compelled us to create an entire framework out of that. The templates suffered from a couple big problems. One was that since they weren't really frameworkized, I guess, they're a little harder to build your own stuff from scratch. They were pretty easy to adapt to whatever purposes you needed, but it was harder to kind of build your own thing. They also had a really big flaw, which is that they didn't work in Outlook, which it turns out is kind of tremendously important for rich emails. Outlook is still obnoxiously popular, and
Not for us.
that's good because it's a complete idiot about how it does rich emails. Outlook
I'm
is
thankful
is
for
the
that though,
worst.
because only half of the people in the Changelog Weeklies list, half of the subscribers we have are all in iOS.
Nice.
Either an iPhone, an iPad, or actually a Mac device. So we half of our market is Mac.
That's
Phenomenal.
That's a big win because it's kind of a nightmare to have to support Outlook, especially if you're doing responsive emails, because Outlook just doesn't support anything. So we had to do a lot of work to get the framework to actually work in Outlook, but we did get it to work. It actually does work in pretty much every popular email client. I think one of the only ones that we really explicitly don't support is Lotus, so those guys are kind of screwed. But everybody else should be good to go.
On our show last week, he was on talking about, he was kind of pumping Lotus up a little bit. He was like, the email Lotus notes, it kind of sucks. But Notes was really capable of doing some cool things. So we got the yin and the yang. This week we're just bashing Lotus, apparently.
Yeah.
It's an easy target to pick on, and I've had to use it before too. To be totally honest, I'll give Lotus this. I'm actually not sure if its email handling is worse than Outlook's. It might be a little better than Outlook's, but it has a pretty small group of users, so it does not get a lot of attention.
Yeah, and in some ways, though, I mean, we've talked about this a few times too. They're kind of pioneers, right? I mean, they kind of started to tackle some of this stuff before anyone else was really tackling it. So you guys could probably understand, as doing Foundation, that you run into issues that when you're kind of blazing trails, you actually have to figure out how to solve the issues. And then the people that come behind you, they're like, the problems are already solved. They just put their own spin on those things.
Oh yeah, we've seen that numerous times. There have been a lot of frameworks that have popped up in the wake of Foundation that in some cases actually started as just straight up Foundation forks and then gradually became their own thing. Which is cool, and I mean they do some interesting stuff of their own, and we can learn from some of the things that they do. And it must be nice that a lot of the problems are already solved.
Right, yeah, and that's what we talked about. And maybe you guys can get into this a little bit, but I can't remember off the top of my head right now what we were talking about. But when the competitor comes up, we were talking about Capistrano, and Vlad, the deployer, came up, and they were like, their tagline was "sucks less than Capistrano," and it's like, that's really taking a shot at somebody who really solved all of your problems that now you're just you already know the solutions and you're just making it more efficient. And to take a shot like that is to diminish the work that they did to make your life easier at this point. And so when those guys come up as Foundation, like you said, some are just literally forks of Foundation. And when they come up and they start, advertising as better than Foundation, then, that's kind of flattering that they're obviously even, that you guys are the bane of their, or the whole, message of their marketing. But at the same time, it's almost like biting the hand that feeds you. You wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't solve the problems for you in the first place.
Yeah, there's definitely a degree of that. And there's been a couple of times when we've crossed paths with some of the other frameworks and they've kind of, I don't want to say they got on our nerves, but they kind of got on our nerves. And it's like, yeah, that's nice. And we're glad you're doing your own thing, but I don't know. We
Show some respect, young ones.
kind of or that, or we just sort of like play nice and then get off the email or get off phone and just kind of be like, yeah, we're going to destroy that. But
Well, since Andrew, you said young ones, so can we give a perspective on the age of Foundation and kind of when it be? I know we just was talking about ink and email and Lotus there, but you just kind of talked about frameworks. So how old is Foundation?
So Foundation is just over 2 years old, or just about 2 years old. I'm pretty sure.
I think it came out September 2011.
Yeah, I think it was September of 2011. So it's just over 2 years old now.
No, that's version 2. That was 2 years old.
That
right?
was
so
version
that was the first
2.
public version.
Yeah, version 1 never saw the light of day. We only used it internally here at ZURB. And Foundation 1 actually was not responsive.
Nice.
The interesting thing about Foundation 1 and actually Foundation's predecessor, which was something called the ZURB Coded Style Guide, is that the ZURB Coded Style Guide was actually the genesis of Foundation. It was also in a lot of ways, and I think Mark would probably, other Mark, not this Mark, different Mark, would back me up on this. It was also the genesis of Bootstrap. Because Bootstrap was actually developed by Mark Otto, who was a designer here at ZURB when I started, and he and I worked on the Coded Style Guide together. He went to Twitter and created
That's
Twitter
some good
Blueprint.
history I didn't know about.
Oh yeah, there's a whole inside baseball thing for this. If you go back and look at the first public release of Bootstrap and the first public release of Foundation, you'll find that they are extraordinarily similar because they came from the same starting point. In fact, same story with Skeleton, which comes up still a little bit now and then, which is like an adaptive framework.
Yeah.
Skeleton was actually written by a guy named Dave Gamache, who worked with me on Foundation 1 before he left ZURB and made Skeleton. So it was all three of those frameworks, Foundation and Skeleton and Bootstrap, in some way or form had their start here at ZURB. So we're pretty proud of all that.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
I didn't even know that. I mean, I can imagine anybody listening is like, whoa, I found this out on the changelog. That's awesome. Do you guys say that often? Is this like
we don't say it
new
a lot,
news?
and it's we say it a little bit. It's kind of funny because like the guy behind Bootstrap, Mark Otto. Well, there's another guy too, Jacob, who works on a lot of JavaScript stuff. But Mark, like Foundation and Bootstrap get compared a lot. There's a lot of like articles out there and big, spreadsheet-driven checklists or whatever of like, what does Bootstrap do and what does Foundation do and which one would I use or which one is better? And most of them end with something along the lines of, Foundation's better for this particular thing and Bootstrap's better for this particular thing, and everybody thinks we're very confrontational or very, I don't know what the word is, angry and violent about the whole thing. The funny thing actually is that Mark Otto and I are actually pretty good friends. We like play StarCraft and stuff now and then. He's terrible. But we've kept in touch the whole time for some of this stuff. We've been to each other's like launch parties and that kind of stuff. So it's at the end of the day, I mean, there's definitely like a competitive angle to some of it, and I'm certainly not going to say that we don't want to beat Bootstrap because we do. But it's at least a reasonably friendly competition. It's at least everybody wants to make better tools and make it easier to make better stuff. So let's all just do our thing, and it'll shake out in the end.
Right. I mean, it keeps you guys moving too, right? If it was only you guys, then we might not have seen 5 major releases in the last 2 years.
That's true. It has definitely kept us moving, and we stay pretty aggressive with Foundation. In fact, we already have tentative dates floating around for the next version of Foundation, so we don't ever want to stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about Foundation 5. So when Foundation 4 came out, I mean, I personally remember I was like, okay, a lot of stuff at that point kind of got rolled into Foundation itself. I think, was that 4 or 3 where all the
4.
JavaScript stuff got rolled into it? I guess that was 4. And I remember thinking like, okay, that was a pretty big milestone. And then Foundation 5 comes around and I'm thinking to myself, wonder what you guys are going to really be focusing on here. And reading the blog post that we'll link to in the show notes, that seems like one of the big focuses that you guys are putting into Foundation 5 is speed.
Yeah.
Am I off base there, or is that right?
No, I'd say that's pretty much the thesis of
Or the need
Foundation
for
5.
speed? Which one is it?
Yeah, speed, baby, speed.
We feel
So
the need.
tell us a little
the
bit about
need
that.
for
What is
speed.
what's the impetus behind that, and what does that mean for the user of Foundation 5?
Sure. So with each release of Foundation, we've tried to have like sort of an overarching what's the goal of this release? We don't want to just bump the number because we like to bump the number. I mean, we do like to bump the number. But we want there to be some sort of reason. Like you were talking about, like 4 was, there were a few big pushes with 4. One was that we did better integrate all the JavaScript stuff. We did a lot of work to actually have the JavaScript components be really integral to the framework. We also, 4 was...
we had that whole move towards mobile first in Foundation 4, so that was huge. That
was a big change. Foundation 4 was, we switched everything everything to be mobile first, and some of that was driven actually because Luke Wroblewski, who literally wrote the book Mobile First and has been on the mobile first warpath forever, is an advisor for ZURB. And over the course of a bunch of lunches and stuff, he sort of bludgeoned me into making Foundation Mobile First, which I think was actually, it was a good move. It was a smart move, but he had to really work at it for a little while. So with Foundation 5, the thing that we're seeing now is, so frameworks have been around for a little while now, and there's quite a few of them at this point. I mean, seems like everybody's trying to get in the game now. Like Yahoo's got their own thing coming out that's even separate from UE. They've got Pure. Pure is them, right?
Yeah.
Is Yahoo. So they've got Pure. I think Google's even maybe trying to get in the game. They've been floating some sort of weird stuff around, like they're going to get into the framework space. So everybody's kind of doing their thing, and it's becoming a more mature field, I guess you could say. And so now what we're running up against is that we know at least a little bit of how to do responsive design, and we know a little bit about how these frameworks ought to work and how they ought to help you build stuff. What we haven't seen enough of really is optimization or speed sort of across the idea of a framework. We want Foundation to be fast, essentially, in a lot of different ways, not just in terms of how quickly it can be delivered, although we're doing work there too, or how quickly pages can load, or what we can do to optimize. Although we've done some, I think, pretty interesting stuff in that vein, and I can talk about that. But we want Foundation 5 to be faster for people to learn. We want Foundation 5 to be faster for people to actually build with, to actually write the code. We want that to be faster. We want it to be faster when it performs and be more performant, because we think that since the tools exist now and the tools are reasonably well defined, what we can really do with Foundation to help this ecosystem along is just lower the barrier to entry even more. In as much as we can get more people up to speed on Foundation, we can get more people up to speed on, no pun intended, by the way, more people up to speed on how they're actually going to build stuff and help them build things more quickly. Just so that we can have more, frankly, just have more responsive stuff built and have responsive stuff that's built well also be built quickly. Because the pace of this stuff doesn't slow down. Like, the pace of web development especially is preposterously fast. I mean, we're on Foundation 5 now. That's only in the space of 2 years. Responsive design at all is only about 3 years old, just over 3 years old. So this is not like we haven't been doing this for like decades or anything like that. Like, this has been a little while. In fact, I realized this when I was doing a little bit of research the other day. I actually didn't even quite realize, but CSS at all, like CSS, we're all like super used to CSS, and it's like, oh, CSS, obviously we build everything CSS. CSS is only about 13 years old.
Yeah, let's say 12, yeah.
Like, it's just not that old. Like, I can think back to very easily when CSS came out, and it's like, it feels like we've been doing it forever, but we haven't. So everything.
I can remember the days when it was still being debated, like, should we use tables or should we use CSS to like style things? And like, Eric Meyer had written some books on it, and he was like, I can remember those days. It wasn't very long ago. You're right. I mean, like, this is still like it's still a baby. It's still an adolescent barely.
Well, it speaks to the kind of the industry. You can go back and read a lot of those books, and they don't feel outdated. Now, the like, obviously the concepts seem outdated because we know better. But like, if you're new to the industry, and you've all dealt with this, right? Like, a friend of yours that wants to start learning this stuff is new to the industry, and they go pick up one of these books, and they're like, yeah, this book's from 2004. Seems good, and the information all seems good, and you're telling them, like, you're reading stuff that nobody cares about anymore. Like, in this industry, 10 years is like eons,
Right, and so we're kind of figuring, if things are moving this quickly, and I mean, at this point, it's like every 6 months or less, like, the entire motif of web design, the entire, like, approach to how some of this stuff works might change. We want people to be able to do things more quickly and build things more quickly. so that they can actually get something done before everything just passes them by. And that goes double for us because I would hazard a guess that we are probably one of the most prolific shops of writing stuff in Foundation, obviously because it's what we write everything in. But we do all of our client work in Foundation. We have anywhere from 12 to 16 or so clients at a time. So we do all of our client work in Foundation. We do all of our projects in Foundation. All of our sites, all of our properties are written with Foundation or being written with Foundation. So we want it to be fast because we have to do it all the time and we want to be more efficient.
So you say that it's not just the speed of, optimizing the code itself, but it's also the speed of learning, the speed of, how long it takes to get up and running with it. So what does that mean for the user? Like somebody that's familiar with Foundation 4, how will Foundation 5 be different for them?
Sure.
So Foundation 5 actually shouldn't be that much different from Foundation 4 from a user's perspective. All the naming of our JavaScript files and our Sass variables, there's very little that changed on that front. The only thing that has changed is the way that you can selectively import parts of Foundation has changed. So it's easier to pick and pull what you need from Foundation. So if you don't need everything, you don't have to use everything. So that's probably the biggest point. We also have some additional new components in Foundation 5, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this program.
Right. But we've been, as far as like getting people up to speed on stuff, like we're rewriting all the documentation. In fact, we're in the middle of that right now, which is going to bring us right up to the wire.
Yeah.
You got a week. What are you doing wasting time on this show?
Yeah, I know, right? we're thinking about the docs that we still have to write while we talk to you. But we're rewriting all of the documentation so that that'll be, it's going to have a lot more examples, a lot more code stuff that you can pull from. Nice. And just drop right into whatever you're working on. It's much more, it's better organized, it's much more verbose than what we had before, at least as far as just example code. That was some feedback that we consistently got was, you guys describe a lot of the things that's going on in here. I want to actually just like see it and be able to grab it and drop it.
Gotcha.
So we're doing a lot of work there.
That's a neat concept too. When we had, remind me of his, Luchik, I believe, Semantic UI.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big component of what he talked about with Semantic UI was that, he wanted it to be easily to grab like one component or one. If you just wanted the grid, you can use the grid only. Or if you wanted certain components, you can easily pull that. And it didn't have the JavaScript and dependencies were separated well enough. Styles and all that stuff was very compartmentalized really well.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of work for that for Foundation 5. I know we've tried to make it as fast and easy as possible to say you want to pull in just a particular thing. I think we even manage all the dependencies and stuff for you now, don't we? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that true for the, like, what do you guys prefer? Do you guys prefer the, I don't know how to describe, the standalone installation of Foundation, or like for a let's say a Rails project, do you prefer the gem installation that you guys are using?
For the Rails installation, we use the gem just because the asset pipeline takes care of bringing in all the JavaScript and the Sass files for us. Mm-hmm. But for non-Rails projects, we've been using Bower a lot recently. Makes it really easy to grab the latest version of Foundation. This is something new we're paying more attention to with Foundation 5. So, but definitely the Rails gem is the way to go, especially so that we don't have our designers go in and accidentally muck up the original Foundation or JavaScript files, which makes upgrading a potential problem.
Right. So, well, that's what I was going to get into a little bit is the upgrade path. So a lot of people who use, so like specifically we're talking about Rails projects or just general people who are using, Ruby gems or Bundler, however they're using it, they're used to just being able to, bundle update, and for the most part it just works. And do you think that that's, you said that Foundation 5 should be pretty similar to Foundation 4, so is there much changes that need to happen for the upgrade path if you're using like a standard installation?
So in terms of Sass variables, no, we have introduced some new Sass variables for defining the new breakpoints that are used for the media queries. But for the JavaScript, we've actually created a shim that will include with up until Foundation 5.1 that will take care of, we had a few plugins, I'm trying to think, Joyride was one of them, where we used camel case to name some variables. And it wasn't consistent where we were using underscores everywhere else. So we've made everything consistent in that sense. But we have a shim that will go through and adjust if you're using the wrong variable names. It'll adjust the variables for you, and we'll include that. It will include that up until 5.1, just so that if you're using 5.0, things that aren't going to break right away.
Right.
And
so then at
actual
5.1, it'll break, and it's up to them to go back and fix all their junk.
Yes, but we have some deprecation notices. So if you're using Foundation, you'll actually see in your Chrome console if you're using something that is deprecated. So if you don't see any warnings, 5.1 should be just as trivial of an upgrade as 5.0 is.
Right. And I know when we went from Foundation 3 to Foundation 4, we changed a lot of just markup syntax. Some of that was because we went mobile first. Some of that was because we just needed to rethink how we were doing some of this stuff. So there were some pretty large philosophical changes, I guess, in that one. There's Foundation 4 to 5 has a lot less big philosophical changes, I guess, to it that are in that kind of vein. So I know things like the grid syntax and that kind of stuff you can leave unchanged. You'll have some in Foundation 5. You'll have some more toys to play with, but you shouldn't have to go through all your markup and make a whole lot of big stringent changes. We're going to have a migration guide for 4 to 5, but it should be pretty straightforward. It shouldn't be like the 3 to 4. I don't know if I can call it a debacle, but there was at least a decent amount of legwork that had to go into upgrading from 3 to 4. 4 to 5 should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no, you guys, I don't know if you actually follow semantic versioning, but when you do major changes like that from 3 to 4, it's perfectly acceptable to break, right? It's perfectly acceptable for it not to work the same or to have some pains with upgrading. But what's interesting to me is for something like Foundation, I think a lot of people are okay with that with other tools, but for something like Foundation, it's just like you constantly want the newest because it feels like the newest is leveraging like modern technologies so much better than the previous version. So I wonder why people aren't as forgiving with Foundation or something like that when it's a major version change as they would be with another project.
Well, we have a lot of people using Foundation are using it for client work. So if somebody is working with Foundation partway through and they encounter an issue and we need to push out fixes for that, we want our customers or our users feeling very comfortable just upgrading any time so that they can get the latest and greatest code.
Right.
So you're right. We definitely can make breaking changes if we absolutely need to, but if you don't have to, or you can like find a way to, I've been in the position where like, even like in Rails projects, if you upgrade a gem and it's the new major version and it breaks things, it's acceptable, but it's still annoying. And I don't know. I always have it just gets really annoying, especially if I don't have time I need the upgrade, but it just,
You definitely
it's a double-edged sword, right? When it fixes a problem that you had to work around before, but it breaks something that you're depending on now. So it's kind of like you don't know whether I should upgrade and spend the time or just still deal with the problem that I'm having now.
Yeah,
exactly. I feel like I almost don't trust the authors as much if they keep making breaking changes. I'm more inclined to just want to leave, not use a particular gem anymore if it changes every time I bump major versions.
That's what I was going to say, especially, we talked a little bit earlier, like the competition level that you're facing in the framework world. That's the world you're playing in. So the harder you make the upgrade path or the more bumpy it might be, you're going to have some changes, obviously, with the, like Andrew said, that are acceptable. But if you can minimize that, you probably stand a chance of like shiny objects not getting their attention, right?
Right. And it's totally a two-edged sword because we can't sit on our laurels and just like do, teeny tiny little changes that don't really impact anything because we need to keep making big sweeping changes in order to stay ahead of any kind of competition. But anytime we do that, we risk, it's a funnel, right? Everybody who uses a current version of Foundation, when the new one comes out, everybody wants to use it. In some cases, it's really sort of aggravating. We get so many requests for people who want to use Foundation 4 with really old versions of IE, like IE 7 or IE 8, which we don't actually technically support. But the funny thing is we actually kept Foundation 3 around specifically because Foundation 3 actually worked in IE 8. So if people needed IE 8 support, we were like, look, we still have like this supported, like it was good code, like it works well, like you can use Foundation 3. And what we always get is, but I don't want to use Foundation 3, I want to use Foundation 4.
I want the shiny new.
Yeah, exactly. I want the shiny new thing. I just want that to work in IE 8. And it's like, it doesn't work there. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, you can use 3 or you can try to make 4 work and it's going to be a world of pain. but they all want the shiny new thing. They all want that to work as far back as they can. And I know we're going to get it with Foundation 5. Can I have Foundation 5 that works in IE7? Can I have Foundation 5 that works in IE8? And we'll continue to toe the line of, well, no.
Yeah, I mean, you're pushing the web forward here, right? I mean, that's the point, is as long as tools continue to coddle the old web, then it doesn't go forward.
Right,
and
I
never understand that debate there. It always boggles my mind.
It's a difficult... It's not an easy decision for us, so this is a thing that's actually come up a lot just with building a framework at all like this, is that if you're trying to stay ahead of stuff, you have to make a lot of decisions where there's not a lot of precedent to fall back on. Mm-hmm. So we can't really look around and go, oh, well, this framework decided to drop blah, and this framework decided to keep support for this. We kind of have to just forge our own path, I guess, and then deal with whatever the consequences of that are, which can be really, really awesome, and it feels like you're, like striding atop the world, just, dominating stuff, and it feels great sometimes, and then sometimes it's really frustrating. Like dropping support for IE8 was a difficult decision because we do have a lot of people who really want or really need support for that kind of browser because they still cater to, large enterprise. They want to use it for whatever other kind of stuff they've got going on that necessitates having that kind of support. But we can't actually make the framework do what we need it to do in order to support those actual browsers. Like we couldn't do mobile first really and support IE8. That was actually the killer with IE8, is that IE8 doesn't support media queries. And for mobile first to work, you have to have media queries that kick in on larger and larger screens, and it's just not going to happen in IE8. So we just couldn't make it work. Like when we went from Foundation 2 to Foundation 3, we dropped support for IE7 because IE7 doesn't support the border box sizing model, and we use that for literally everything. So we had to drop support for that. And we got complaints about that, and we'll get complaints about 8, and we'll keep getting it. But I feel bad when someone's like, I really want to use Foundation, but I have to support IE8. And it's like, well, I wish I could help you, but I just I can't, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I wish there was something we could do, but there's just not. So, sorry. I feel their pain, because we've had to do that too, but that's just the way it goes.
We're going to pause for just a second. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little bit about responsive, because you kind of touched a bit on that. And I think I want to talk a bit about, what you're doing around that with Foundation. But let's pause for a minute and give a shout out to our sponsor number 2, TopTal. It's they're an awesome sponsor of ours. And for those of you who are freelancing out there, would like to be testing out a freelancing option, or even trying out, if you get a full-time position and you're like, wow, maybe I would like to freelance. Maybe I can, do some fun things with like Node or Rails or some cool, edgy new technology, but you don't want to quit your day job. So you want to work kind of in a no-risk kind of freelance-like project. TopTal can enable you to do that. They're looking for some elite senior engineers. You can work on special projects with companies like Airbnb, Artsy, IDEO, and many others. Work remotely on a beach or anywhere in the world. It doesn't really matter. And I read a lot of Twitter bios out there that say, like, I do, this thing, like whether it's Java or something else during the day, and then at night I'm hacking on, or at night I'm a Node hacker, at night I'm a Rails hacker, or whatever. Well, that nighttime thing you can kind of do with TopTal. And to get started, you can head to toptal.com/developer and click Join the Best. And because they want to work with only the best senior engineers out there, they've got a well thought out 4-stage screening process. It involves a personal Skype conversation to get you started, to introduce you to who TopTal is, what their mission is, and see if you're a fit. And from end to end, the entire screening process includes an English speaking test, a time algorithm test, a quick technical interview with TopTal core engineers, as well as a test project. And once you've kind of gotten through that process there, the sky's the limit. And if you think you have what it takes, to head to toptal.com/developer right now to get started. And tell them the changelog sent you. And last week when I mentioned this, I did invite some people to give me some feedback, and we did get a little bit of feedback there, which is great, because it seems that some people are really, really enjoying their experience with TopTal. So you can email me, adam@thechangelog.com. I want to hear what your experience is like. Go to toptal.com/developer to get started. Click the button that says Join the Best. So I know that we were talking a little bit about responsive web design before the break here. Andrew, did you have any notes on that? I know we kind of haven't really dove deeply into it yet.
Well, I mean, obviously, everything Foundation is responsive, and I think Ink the same way. But what I would like to kind of get into, because I mean, if you're here, you're familiar with if you're using Foundation at this point, you're familiar with responsive, just the idea of responsiveness. I'd like to kind of get into Foundation 5 and what's new with Foundation 5, and subsequently how you guys have altered the way that you're dealing. You know, you said that there's some different variables around your breakpoints and stuff like that. So why don't we talk a little bit about just what's new with Foundation 5 and how it's changing how you're dealing with things like responsiveness and stuff?
Sure. I think I'll turn it over to Mark here to talk about it, but I think that probably the biggest thing that or at least the one that we're talking about the most, because we're actually pretty excited about it, is a plugin of ours called Interchange. That we introduced the plugin in Foundation 4, but in one particular case, and in Foundation 5 we've changed it pretty dramatically to do a lot of really cool stuff. But that's a big one for addressing responsive. I'll let Mark talk about it, though.
Oh, yeah. So Interchange, that's probably one of the bigger components of Foundation 5. And we've taken the idea of just selectively loading an image based on a media query in your device, since media queries, we use some JavaScript to do this, but since media queries inherently don't allow you to prevent an image from being downloaded on a device, Interchange goes in with some JavaScript to make that happen so that you don't unnecessarily download multiple images on a small device. So we've taken the idea over to HTML content, so we can actually load in external HTML content with Interchange starting in Foundation 5. So if you have lots of content that may include images and all sorts of stuff that is not applicable to a mobile device, you can now use Interchange to prevent that content from ever being pulled down to your device in the first place. So this is going to make your websites feel just a little bit faster.
So the use case that I like to throw out for this, and this came from Luke. Again, this came from Luke Rabluski, was that if you imagine because if you build things mobile first with Foundation, and Foundation is built mobile first, so it's obviously encouraged to build things mobile first. If you're doing a page, for example, that has a map or has directions or something like that, on a mobile device, you may just want to load an image. You may just want to load a simple, single, mobile optimized image for the location, and you may want to have like a link to fire up somebody's native mapping application. Whereas on a desktop, you may want to include like a full-on interactive Google map. Now, in the past, there hasn't really been a way on the client side, or at least, without delving into back-end device profiling or doing some sort of like htaccess hackery, to say on mobile devices, I only want to load this image. On larger devices, I want to pull in, a full-on Google map, something that has a lot of assets, a lot of requests, something that's going to be very heavy and taxing on the device. But with Interchange now in Foundation 5, I can actually say for a given media query match for something that's like, only a small device essentially, load this particular partial, which just includes an image. Then if we detect that this is a larger device, this is a device that has a larger screen, is presumably more capable of dealing with a larger request, go ahead and load in a different partial, load in a different HTML section that has the actual interactive Google map, something like that. So we're taking the concept that we introduced with Interchange in Foundation 4, which was just loading the right image for the right device. Now we want to be able to load the right just stuff for the right device, which has been like a huge thorn in the side of responsive design for a long time, because it was most obvious with images for a long time, because unless you were doing stuff on the back end, which most people who work with Foundation or build stuff with Foundation, a lot of those people don't really actually have any access even to the back end or even really care about the back end. They're mostly working on the front end. There was no way without dealing with the back end to say, I only want to load the right asset for the right type of device. So with Interchange, we tried to do that for images. But this has been a huge problem. And mobile devices are, in some ways, they're kind of stupid. Which is that if you do want to load the right asset, you can't even do it by like hiding and showing the right assets, because mobile devices will load every piece of media that's on that page, whether it's shown or not. They don't try to do anything smart about that. They're starting to, I think, like the dev builds of Chrome on Android or something along those lines will actually try to defer loading media if it detects that they're hidden by default. But that's going to be a while till that's any kind of standard, and we want to just get out ahead of that. Yeah. So Interchange is One of the larger components of Foundation 5 that we've added, and the ability to just load arbitrary sections of arbitrary chunks of HTML depending on a certain media query. We've tried to make that as straightforward and easy for a front-end developer as we possibly can. It's actually pretty simple to deal with. So that was a big one.
And as this is a funny thing too, because if you look at like historically speaking with mobile devices, as there's been a kind of a few things that have happened that have contributed ultimately to people paying more money for data, which is the data has become increasingly faster, right? You have access to a much faster connection than you used to have. So subsequently, we've become comfortable with like making devices download more assets because we're not afraid of them sitting there waiting. And then because of optimizing these assets, we'd actually download twice as much because we download the mobile version and we download the desktop version. So all of that contributes to ultimately your little phone in your pocket costing you a lot more money. And with all the unlimited data plans going away, it's just like, I mean, it's mind-boggling how the consumer is the one that's taking the hit for all of this stuff. Interchange kind of in an off way aids that, right? Because you don't have to download all of the content that is on the page just because you're trying to show a mobile optimized version of something.
Right, and I mean, and it's good for you too as the person who offers the site. I mean, obviously it's good for consumers because they're going to have to wait less, they're going to have to pay less, they're going to use up less of their data, which I think it's actually kind of funny. Like if you don't have an unlimited data plan, which a lot of people don't anymore, if you have like a newer phone, like an LTE-enabled phone, like you can burn through your data in less than 5 minutes if you're trying. Yeah. Like you can just, I could fire up Netflix or whatever and just start playing, some sort of HD episode of something, and it's going to look great on my phone, and it'll come down in LTE speed, and it'll burn through 200 megs in like 4 minutes.
Yeah, it was crazy. I did something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was driving from Texas to Nashville where I live at, and I went through like 2.5 gigs on the trip. And I was just like, I don't even really, it was like streaming RDO and just doing different things. And like with just data consumption, I get home and it's like, you've reached 60% of your plan. I was like, oh my gosh, like how did this happen?
It goes so fast. But it's still, and even with the speed of like LTE or the speed of like newer devices and newer networks, you still, if you're throwing the weight of every kind of asset and all the stuff that you need onto mobile devices and not really optimizing for it, people are still going to run into just slow to load pages. Like the latency is still not good. The bandwidth is still, on average in the US, mobile bandwidth is about a fourth to a sixth, so it's about 15% as fast as the average like wired or home Wi-Fi speed. So it's faster, but it's not like it's crazy fast. It's still quite a bit slower than other kinds of connections are, and the latency is still pretty high. And that's just in the US, which actually does reasonably well. We're not on top of the world by any means, but we do okay. In other countries, especially in like Africa or Eastern Europe, any of those kinds of areas, or a lot of parts of Asia, it's much slower, and you have to contend with much more demanding constraints. So it's getting better, but you still have to optimize things, and there hasn't been a way to easily optimize a responsive site for front end developers, we would say, until now.
Well, we also that brings up, I guess, another good point is as even a company who's hosting all this large content, most likely you're using Amazon S3 to store your images. If all your users are downloading these large images from your device, I mean, every time somebody downloads an image that they don't look at, you're paying the bill for them to do that.
On that note, I mean, something we covered recently, and for subscribers of the Changelog Weekly, you'll probably remember this. I think it was in issue 13 actually. So the most recent issue, we talked about pre-browsing, which is kind of like a different topic, but in the same vein. What are you guys' thoughts on pre-browsing, like using the rel tag prefetch to kind of pre-render or kind of go prefetch a URL? It doesn't quite change, what Interchange is doing, which is choosing which asset to pull and whatnot, but it's still in this like front end optimization, I guess, even somewhat anticipation of what the user wants.
I thought when prefetching or the rel tag for it or whatever became really available to use in any kind of browser, which was not terribly long ago. That was maybe a year ago. It was not particularly long ago that it became available at all. it's a really cool idea that I think has a lot of maybe unexpected ramifications, and it's a little harder to use than it might seem at first glance. I think it's great from a user perspective, from a user experience perspective. I think it's great if you can do it right, if you can get it right. Because if you're on a page and we know with some certainty where you're going to go next, if that can already be loaded, then obviously it's great to click a link and just see the next page and not wait for anything. That's awesome.
I almost feel like it could be kind of, I don't want to deviate the topic, but it's kind of a neat thing to think about. Like if you were hovering a particular target, you know, like the mouse and I guess on a touch device, this doesn't quite apply because you don't really have the hover effect, but you know, I mean, you kind of lose it there, which does kind of suck. But if you're on a desktop, you know, you're hovering a particular element, you might anticipate they're going to click the button. And if they do, you can kind of prefetch maybe temporarily and start pulling down some assets. And if they don't, then, you know, kind of kill prefetch, so maybe dynamically apply the rel tag. I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on it because it's all around this speed, you know, your need for speed. So
the cool thing about it is, it's like an instance like that where you can either predict based on their behavior where they're probably going to go next, then do it that way, or what we've actually even tried to do ourselves is to look at analytics and just go, okay, if they're on this page, most of the time the next place they go is here. So we'll actually try to selectively apply the prefetch property to that page. Now the downside is that, I mean, on your laptop at your office Wi-Fi, that's kind of to some extent irrelevant whether we get it right or wrong. I mean, if we get it wrong, then it's going to be a little bit of a slower load. It's faster if we get it right, but the data and everything like that's kind of unnecessary, or it doesn't really make any difference. On somebody's phone, though, if we get it wrong, we just cost them money.
Yeah, so true.
We cost them money. We probably cost us money because we're hosting it. You don't really have any way of predicting, like you said, like there's no hover, so you can't use their behavior to necessarily predict what they're going to do next. You could maybe try to use position on the page, something like that. But even then, if you're trying to do it predictively, God help you if you like get it wrong and you've done it 3 or 4 times while they're on the same page. Right. Then you're just screwing them. And I think I'd have to actually check, but I think. A lot of mobile browsers, if they are prefetching stuff, they don't technically consider the entirety of the sort of like fetching transaction to be done until the prefetching is also done, which can give the perception that it's also taking a lot longer to load than it really is.
Oh, wow.
Or at least you'll still see sort of like the little data ticker, like on most devices, you can kind of see when network traffic is happening. The page might be fully loaded, but there's still something going on. And I know there's some people who actually notice that and kind of feel like something is not quite right, I guess. Yeah. It's almost a little too transparent. I think it's a super cool idea. I think it should probably only be used when you're pretty confident. I think analytics are a good way to do that. We've done it so that I know we've done this in the past with some of our apps or with some of our sites, is that if our analytics say that if someone's on a certain page, more than 80%, more than 90% of the time they go to this other page next, we can be pretty confident in that, and we'll potentially take the hit, because it is just a really cool experience if you like go to click on something and it's just there. Like it's just, even on a desktop, that's cool. If it's just like boom, it's done, it just feels nice. So that can be really cool. I think it's interesting tech. I think you just have to know what you're doing.
Awesome.
It's kind of a rambling answer to that, but
yeah.
What are we just like? Yeah, it was rambly.
No, so. We're kind of up against it here. Anything else you want to cover in Foundation 5? Kind of a sales pitch before we just briefly mention Ink a little bit?
We can like do a quick little laundry list of things just to watch out for in the new Foundation. We've finally, by popular request, integrated the off-canvas layouts into Foundation, which are those patterns where you can have navigation or some other side panel like kind of slide in from the side like it's off the screen. We've done a whole new implementation of that's all hardware accelerated. It's actually really smooth. It's really cool. And that's actually baked into Foundation now, so we will not have to field any more questions about how to integrate it with Foundation. It'll just be there. That'll be nice. We've redone tabs. There was a lot of stuff about that. We've written an all new, actually for the nerdy amongst the audience, we've written a new command line interface for spinning up stuff in Foundation, which Mark knows a lot better than I do. But it's just a little wrapper for creating a new Compass project.
so you don't have to type in all the compass create -r ZURB foundation using foundation and set up a gem file for yourself, which we get a lot of questions about. So it just helps you to not have to write all those commands. You can use our CLI and say foundation new and then your project name, and it can take care of the rest for you.
Nice.
You're
So
leveraging libsass, is that right?
That's actually, so that would be something else. We're using libsass locally within the Foundation repo to generate the documentation.
Okay.
So now that we've tested Foundation in libsass, if you wanted to use Foundation in a non-Ruby project, we can safely say that libsass is going to work for you. There were a few things that we were doing that didn't quite work. I think it was the opacity filter. There's some known bug in libsass that it wasn't working, but it seems to all work now. And we took our compile times down from about 4 to 5 seconds to less than half a second. Absolutely incredible.
Right.
And then the one last thing that there's two very quickly. One is that we've also integrated fastclick.js into the whole thing, just because the 300 millisecond delay you get on touch devices when you click on stuff is just super annoying, and it just makes everything feel slow. And fastclick is actually pretty well done and pretty reliable, so we went ahead and just integrated that. So that'll just hopefully make things just feel snappier when you use Foundation to build stuff. And then we've also added a medium grid size, which people have been clamoring for. Previously, we had a small grid size and a large grid size you could specify. Now you can specify one in between using just classes. So that's been integrated across the board. So there's medium sizes for pretty much everything now.
Awesome.
So definitely some stuff coming. Pretty much everything there. I mean, there's some stuff that's just by popular request. We went ahead and included, and we wanted to have those components. But the big thesis is that we're hoping this will be the fastest foundation to use, the fastest foundation to build with, the fastest foundation to learn, and the fastest one to actually deliver to people. So.
And that comes out next Thursday, right?
Comes out next Thursday. It comes out on the 21st, November 21st. And actually, I'll do this on the podcast thing. If you're actually in the Silicon Valley area, we're having a launch party on the 21st. If you let us know at ZURB somehow, you can catch us on Twitter or whatever. We will extend an invitation to you, and you can come get drunk with us.
Awesome. Get drunk. It's be a good foundation. But,
exactly. Well, you don't have to get drunk. You can just watch us do it.
Cool. So, yeah. Briefly, we talked about Ink a little bit. Give us the elevator pitch of Ink. Well, we don't have a lot of time left, so.
I can do like the 30-second elevator pitch for Ink because it's really cool. Ink is Foundation for responsive emails. So if you want to create rich emails that work on lots of different kinds of devices, they will actually, they'll actually work basically responsively. If they're on smaller devices, you can have a grid that actually works, that actually reshuffles things and moves things around in a kind of a responsive way. You can use Ink to build that. We have all the documentation for it and everything written up. You can just find it at zurb.com/ink. But we've started using it for all of our newsletters and stuff like that. It works in pretty much every major mail client, including Outlook, including ones that don't support responsive stuff at all, which was no small feat and a source of a great deal of stress for various people on the team who had to work on that. But it's pretty cool, and email kind of gets the short end of the stick sometimes because it's like, ew, emails. But email is still like the number one way of actually connecting with an audience, and it's still one of the absolutely most prevalent like means of communication and staying in touch with an audience and keeping them engaged. Rich emails are like kind of a big deal. But Ink has stuff already built into it, like a grid like Foundation. It has buttons built in like Foundation. It has a lot of sort of like those components you'd expect from a framework, but in an email context. So it's the only thing like it that I know of, and it's pretty cool. That came out last week.
Gotcha. So it's you said this, I think, right? zurb.com/ink, I-N-K.
I-N-K, yep. It's we wanted to figure out what would be a word for it, which is essentially the way Foundation is the foundation of building a website. We wanted Ink to be one of the foundations of writing something, so Ink. It was between that and like a pen or a quill or something like that. Yeah. But if we called it Ink, that also gave us the opportunity to have a really cool squid for a mascot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And he's got in each one of his tentacles, he's got like a different device. It's like perfect representation of emails.
Yep. So yeah, that's out now. It's you can download it and use it, and there's documentation, and we support it and everything. So
awesome.
And that's also all open source. It's on GitHub. You can download the whole repo. You can submit pull requests, everything.
So it's literally Foundation for email.
That is
it's like the way you
basically
guys
what
did
it is.
Foundation, you put that same amount of care and love into ink, and
Pretty much.
awesome. Well, cool. Yeah. So these are 2 cool projects to be on the lookout for. Just more cool stuff from ZURB. It's been about, I think, 2 years since the first time you guys were on the changelog, and unlike last time, we didn't mention Britney Spears this time. So there you go, Britney Spears.
Britney Spears.
Well, we mentioned her now.
Yeah, she's been mentioned. Cool. Yeah. So for those of you that are new, we ask the same questions at the end of every episode, and we'll go ahead and ask them now. So Jonathan, for a call to arms, so you officially release it next week. So what would be something you'd like to see the community kind of get involved with when it's released?
When Foundation comes out, I would love to have the community really put the screws to interchange. I want to see what all people can actually do with that, and I'd love to know if there are more ways we can do work on the front end to optimize the delivery of responsive sites, because it's for most people it's just too hard on the back end to actually do. Most people just who are going to do front end stuff, they can't do device profiling and htaccess hackery and stuff on the back end. So I want to figure out ways to really optimize this on the front end, including if we can figure out any way, and we've talked about it a little bit here, but if anybody has any bright ideas on client-side ways of optimizing the delivery of assets based on the bandwidth and latency of the client, that would be amazing.
Cool.
So any bright ideas there?
Awesome. Mark, anything to add to that or anything different?
Well, I would love to see more people get involved on GitHub. We already have a pretty active community on GitHub, the issues section, and just love seeing people get in there, answering questions, helping us continue to refine Foundation and just make it more awesome. So hoping to see more people get involved and helping us out.
Yeah, anybody who wants to get on GitHub and help us close out some issues, that would be just rad, because every issue that somebody else closes out is one less thing that makes us go gray. So
Right. Yeah, that's a common request. It's kind of just like it's almost like a secretary of issues, somebody to help out with just like managing this stuff, because it becomes, when you're in open source, when your project gets big enough, just managing the issues and like validating the requests and stuff becomes a full-time job. And so it's definitely something that people need help with.
You can't see Mark's face, but he's going, because he's had to do that. Just, oh, God.
Yeah.
Late nights. I can imagine.
So if you weren't doing, if you weren't working at ZURB, Mark, what would you be doing?
I would probably be out sailing or mountain biking.
Is that 2 sailings in a row, Andrew?
That's 2 sailings in a row.
That's 2.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that doesn't
Cool,
sound
though.
cliche.
I'm pretty sure Kalen said he'd be sailing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark's got all kinds of stories about adventures on catamarans in the ocean and around some islands and whatnot. He's quite the sailor. So.
I don't know. I was out in the Grenadines earlier this year, and it was just absolutely magical out there, and warm water and the best pina coladas you'll ever have.
Awesome. What about you, Jonathan?
If I wasn't working at ZURB, at all, I would actually, in a perfect world, and if someone would give me the $15 million or so, if anybody's listening wants to give me some money, I would love to have my own movie theater. Actually,
dude, I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fantastic. We got to find someone who's going to give us about the 10 or 15 million you need to build the facility and get all the equipment.
Yes, man. I would love to build a movie theater, man.
See what we can find. That's my not so secret not working at ZURB dream. So
just go dig up some of those gold bars that you stored in your backyard, Adam.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about those.
You are in Texas.
Yeah, that's true.
If you got some of those, I'll come take them.
Yeah. And then the last one is for a programmer hero. So, Jonathan, just someone that's kind of been influential in your life career to this point.
Oh, programmer hero. I don't know if this is cliche for a front end guy or not, but Paul Irish is a freaking genius. Mm-hmm. I really like most everything that he's done. Although I actually have one that is I have a different one which is maybe less cliche, but I really like the guy. He's part of the Google Chrome Dev Relations team in England. Actually, his name's Jake Archibald.
Yeah.
He is. He and I both spoke at a conference in Finland earlier this year, and his talk was amazing. Partly in the content, which was all about like animation optimization in modern browsers, which was just awesome and like some of the best research stuff I've ever seen. But his actual slides were all built in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and were just like some of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Like it was incredible. Like the things he can do with like animating SVGs with JavaScript along paths and like all kinds of just cool stuff I did not even know you could do. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, kind of a weird tie-in for him. I follow him on Twitter. He's got his name is, I think it's like Jaffa the Cake or something.
Jaffa the Cake,
and,
yep.
Yeah. Every time he tweets and I see his avatar, you see the avatar is like real small and can barely see him. For some reason, his picture looks exactly like Win Netherland to me.
Yeah,
and so whenever
does.
he tweets, I always think it's Win tweeting.
Similar
and he's talking
eye.
about with the changelog. There's something about him that looks same. It's a weird tie-in, but yeah. Cool guy.
You can ask Jake about this, but the reason he only ever shows like half his face in avatars, the other half is really ugly.
We can edit that out. Don't worry. That's fine.
Not just leave it. I've told it to his face.
Yeah.
It's really tough to name one person I would say, but I'm going to say Ryan Bates. Before I moved down here, I used to watch. Well, I still watch his screencast. He's been on hiatus for the last couple
A few
months
now. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the last screencast he did was on Foundation, which was kind of funny. But definitely, I always admired someone who could take a really complex subject and break it down and make it seem relatively trivial and easy to learn.
Yeah, we love Ryan. He's a good guy, and the update he wrote just a few weeks ago, I think, about he's still going on hiatus. Get some time off for you, but man, the community definitely misses his contributions because he does some really cool stuff.
Yeah, we've been talking about burnout, and it seems like it's a mixture of that, and I think he was sick for a bit. But Ryan, if you're listening somehow, you're just like chilling, listening to the changelog for whatever reason, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. We wish you well, my friend, for sure. And we want to see you back, but back better, for sure.
Yeah, take your time, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, that's a good show, man. I'm stoked you guys were able to come on and talk about Foundation 5. Jonathan, I know you made an appearance a while ago, and it's been a while since then, but you guys have been, I think when we talk about the competition of frameworks and whatnot, I think what the listeners of the show would definitely need to know is that, like, you guys have been in it for the long haul. I mean, everything from what you guys have been doing at ZURB to what you've been doing with Foundation, you've been committed. So I think one thing we do when we choose or make choices to use frameworks or whatever is trust. And I believe you guys have definitely earned the trust of the community, and you guys are leaders in many, many ways. And we just appreciate you sharing it with us, honestly, and then inviting us to contribute. That's super awesome. So we want to thank you for taking the time to come on, Jonathan and Mark, for sharing their wisdom here, for sure. And then, Brian, for reaching out and reminding me, hey, that you guys announced Foundation 5, which we covered today for you real quick, and we can't wait till next Thursday when you release it. So,
well, thank you very much. We really, really appreciate it, and it's always fun to come on. We were stoked when you reached out and wanted to talk again. It had been a little while, so thanks for having us.
It's good timing for sure. I think honestly.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys being so flexible too. I mean, you guys came on so quick and nailed it
for sure. Yeah, we
we needed a break today.
Now get back to writing those
well,
docs.
next Thursday you have a
Pretty
big
much.
break, right? You got the beer party, the drink up. Your launch party.
Oh yeah, we'll chill out for the party, and then I'm sure on Friday we'll be pushing 501. So.
Yeah. And also want to give a shout out to our sponsors, DigitalOcean and TopTal. I mentioned earlier, just about us moving over to Blazing. I like saying it. It's funny, right? Blazing fast SSD cloud servers. I mean, I just think it sounds cool for one, but I definitely think it's cool. So if you've been reading the changelog for a while, and if you're browsing it right now as you're listening to this, and it's much faster, much zippier, that's why. So take advantage of our $10 hosting credit with them. Changelog sent me is how you do it. Changelog sent me. Use that when you sign up. There's a coupon code spot there. If for some reason that doesn't work out, just email support. They're awesome. They're going to get right on it. And then I mentioned the tutorials that I use myself. And if you're a skilled person in any sort of way, and you can share some knowledge back on how to do something with a DigitalOcean server or how to use a certain piece of open source technology, you can get paid $50 to write tutorials, and we'll have some links in the show notes for that. But also email Barry at DigitalOcean.com if you want some stickers. He will ship them around the world. I don't care where you're at. He'll send them to you. And then TopTal, you got to join the TopTal network if you're into freelancing, and you definitely have to check them out. TopTal.com/developers to apply. Work with some awesome people around the world. And if you haven't yet, they also have a really awesome engineering blog. We'll have a link for that in the show notes as well. And they've been featured a couple times on the Chainsaw too, so that's been awesome. But that's it for us, I think. I mean, I'm just stoked we're on DigitalOcean and it's super fast. I can't believe it. I'm excited. But Jonathan, Mark, thanks again for coming on the show, and let's say goodbye.
See you guys later.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.